Okay, so let's first talk about what a matrix is. And so when we have a matrix, it is just a rectangular array of numbers. And so the rectangle comes from the fact that you're going to have some rows and columns in a matrix. So we have a rectangular array of numbers. And so notice that matrix A is an example, and notice that they use a capital letter to name the matrix, and then they have numbers that are arranged in rows and columns. So the order of a matrix refers to the size of the matrix. And so, in general, the order of the matrix is referred to as rows by columns. So you count the number of rows first, and then you count the number of columns. So if I'm looking at matrix A, rows go across. So this would be row 1 of matrix A. This would be row 2 of matrix A. And this would be row 3 of matrix A. So I would say the order of matrix A starts out with 3 rows by, and then if I look at columns, columns go up and down. And so this would be column number 1 of matrix A. And this would be column number 2, column number 3, and column number 4. So the order of matrix A, I would say, is 3 by 4. Now, when we're talking about the individual elements of a matrix, we're talking about the specific numbers in a certain row and column. So they're the specific numbers that are in a specific row and column. So in general, an element is referred to by its row first and column second, just like you would determine the order. So in this first example, when they're asking me to determine the value of lowercase a 3, 2, notice the lowercase a corresponds to the uppercase A that was the name of the matrix. And then the 3 tells me to look in row 3, and the 2 tells me to look in column number 2. So if I come down here to row 3 and I look in column number 2, I am talking about the -7 that is right there. So row 3, column 2 has a value of -7. On the next example, they are asking me to determine the value of A to 4. So now I'm talking about the element that is going to be in row 2, column number 4. So if I look at row 2 and column number 4, now I'm looking at the 8. And then finally, the last one, I'm trying to determine the value of A23. So for the A23, I'm trying to look at what element is in row 2, column 3. So if I'm looking at row 2 and column 3, that is the -5. Okay, so on these examples, it says consider the following matrix. So now I have a matrix D. The first question says determine the order of D. So if I count my rows first, I see that I have 1, 2, 3 rows. And then when I count my columns, I also have 1, 2, 3 columns. So the order of matrix D would be 3 by 3. Now let me erase that so we can see the elements. It says determine the value of D21. So if I'm looking at D21, that tells me that I'm looking in row 2, which is this row here, and then I'm looking at column number 1. And so the element that's in D21 has a value of 1. All right, the next one asks me for D13. So for D13, now I'm looking in row number 1, but I'm looking at the third column, so that has a value of -2. With my next example, notice we have matrix C. If I count the rows first, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different rows. And when I look at the columns, there are 2 different columns. So matrix C is a 5 by 2 matrix. All right, now when I'm looking for specific elements within that matrix, when they say determine the value of C31, I'm looking specifically at row 3, which is there, and then column 1. And so that would be a value of 16. And then for the last one, it says I'm looking for C42. So this means that I'm looking in, this time, row 4 and column number 2, and I would have a value of -48. Now, if they did something like, let's say they asked you for C61, and we have a matrix, obviously, that doesn't have a row 6, that's when you would say there is none. So they didn't ask us any there, but anytime they ask us for something where there's not a row or column that corresponds to what they're asking for, then we would say none.